Fake News Friday! Exclamation point. Get in here and join us, because you know you want to! Exclamation point.
Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. Thank you to everybody who has joined us here today. We are live across the internet right now on 12 different platforms. It's great to have you joining us here for this conversation. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be talking about how to stay out of jail when running for office. And plus, it's Fake News Friday and all the fake news worth to criticize. And what's that? Oh, it sounds like we have our friendly neighborhood Sean Bartley joining us. Sean, how you doing today?
Well, good morning. That was a fun addition.
Well, good. Well, thank you for stopping by. And I know that you're in the neighborhood and you're wondering, what we would like to talk about today. And we thought, what? How about we stay out of jail?
Yeah. Well, great neighborly topics to talk about today.
Yes, over the fence. And it's what you should be talking about with your neighbors, because if you really do want to make a difference, you want to do it the right way and you want to do it above board and to win the right way. So we're going to be talking about that throughout the program today. And we're going to do so. And while you're waiting for us to get into that really juicy topic, I recommend you go to politicaltradesecrets.com right now. Sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider and get exclusive stuff. It's really that simple. You just sign up, and then we send you out weekly insider emails. We send you all the, like a fundraising email, how to do this or that. This is the best stuff. You want to go check that out. And then additionally, today we're going to be talking about some various news stories, and I recommend that you check it out by signing up to get our text messages. You can go to, you can text me 202-918-3345. It's 202-918-3345. It's a great way for you to make sure you are a part of our community and you get the link to the show right before we start, all those different things. And Sean, anything else that you think people should really know about today?
Absolutely. Well, a couple things. One is there are some wild things in the news, so I'm really looking forward to get to that.
Totally.
And if you are, if you're thinking about running for office, or and you want to work with folks that are not going to just make sure that you stay out of jail, but also are in a position to succeed, that's us here at Olson Strategies. So reach out to us. It's OLSON strategies.com. You can email me at Sean, SEAN at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. We would love to have a conversation with you about what it takes to run for office. if you're already in the campaign, how we can work together to really be able to have the most impact on your campaign, but really to be able to bring your vision to life. In your community, your state, the country, or even the world, we would love to have that conversation with you. So reach out to us at Olson Strategies. And during the show today, Dustin mentioned we're on 12 different platforms, but how we would love to have you be involved in the conversation. All you got to do, wherever you are, you can leave a comment. If you do it during the show and you're in real time, this is really a great opportunity. We're going to incorporate that right into the show. If it's afterwards, we do follow up. We go back out. We'll comment. We'll love, wow, and your comments as well. So while you're doing that to the episode, we'll be doing that to your comments. So
Yeah.
really appreciate that.
Yeah, I love it. We do love all the comments and questions, so keep them coming. It really does make a difference. You know, the way the algorithms work, we all are run by algorithms, is when you like, love, wow, when you comment and question, all those things do help get the program further. It's kind of like the jet fuel that pushes it further out into the hinterlands, and to make sure that people that we really care about, citizens of this country who really want to make a difference for their community, for their state, and for our country, are really empowered to be the most effective, powerful political leaders possible, that we can help unleash their political power. And who knows, if you were to like, love, wow, if you were to comment or question, how that's going to help. And more importantly, the additional way that you can make a difference is join the Share Force. So join ShareForce, make a difference, and it's as simple as right down there's a way to retweet wherever you're at. You can just retweet the program, and please do that. Or if you are on Facebook, share it. Or if you are just out there in the world, use your carrier pigeons, whatever it takes. This program all over the place so that we can make sure that everybody is able to be inspired and empowered to run for office, and in this case, stay out of jail while doing it, because there are some candidates who have actually gone to jail. There are some people who have managed campaigns who have gone to jail, and you do not want that person who has the best of intentions when they get started to somehow end up in a bad situation. It's not just because they're somehow a bad person. A lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of what don't seem like commonsensical rules in politics, some of which have very good reason for existing, and some of which may not, but ultimately you have to navigate all that. But let's get into the news. Anything else we people know here at the front before we get into the news?
No, I think the news is a great place to start.
All right. Well, the big thing you called me immediately this morning, and you wanted to talk about the Joe Biden's pathetic job numbers, and how you were watching your favorite program this morning, and
Yeah,
they were beside themselves.
yeah. More so, as you know, I watch Morning Joe for a few minutes every morning to get my blood boiling
Hmm.
right out of the gate, and today was no different. Except they announced the job numbers, and I think the word I would use to describe Mika this morning was crestfallen. She was
That's great.
she did not know what to make of it. She looked in the depths of despair as she reported to it, and why, you might ask. So the expected number of jobs out of the Biden jobs plan, as you'll remember, was
Hmm.
1 million jobs this month. So, were they depressed because we only had 700,000 jobs, Dustin? No.
Nope.
Well, maybe we got halfway, 500,000 jobs.
Nope.
No. In actuality, it was a creation of 266,000 jobs, which was
Wow.
even less jobs than last month. And so they they were trying to figure out a reason why this could have possibly happened. Like, um, because they're as confused as the rest of us, right? Because
Hmm.
literally, you walk down the street, you go down any main thoroughfare in this country, and you'll see help wanted signs. So how is
Yep.
it possible that jobs aren't being created? Well, It is, they hypothesize that it's possible. It's because people um, are making more on unemployment
Mhm.
than by reentering the workforce. It,
That's what's going on.
and so, you and I were talking offline this morning and said, have we ever seen Republican leadership proven right so quickly
Yeah.
and so unequivocally than this? I mean, I just cannot think of a time where it was just laid out in real numbers. And and the conversation was really great. I never encourage people to watch any MSNBC, but the the looks on their faces, and then bringing in the jobs gurus who say, well, you know this is something that's going to just be around till September,
Mhm.
because that was the latest extension was through September. And it was interesting. They said, so what about these mom and pop businesses? One of the panelists said, well, what about the mom and pop businesses or these restaurants that can't hire? What are they going to do? And they said, well, you're probably going to see more husbands and wives and grandmas and grandpas working in the kitchen 7 days a week till this can happen.
So we were last Friday. We've been getting out quite a bit, and of course, for the last year, honestly. But we went back to our old neighborhood over by the Marine Barracks on Capitol Hill, and we wanted to support a couple of the businesses there, and that was really nice. And we had a friend in town, and we stopped by a local right across from the Marine Barracks. It was great. They're having for the first time, I think, probably in the year, the Marine parade, which is a great thing if you're ever in Washington, D.C. over the weekend, or over on a Friday in the summer months, like late spring through the summer months, early spring or early fall. They do this a great thing on Friday nights at the Marine Barracks where they have the color guard and all the different people who go out there and they perform, and the Marine Corps, the president's own Marine Corps band performs. It's really a neat thing. They're doing it for the first time in the last year, and across the street is this locally owned, veteran owned uh, restaurant called Valor, and we sat down there, and they were packed full of folks. Of course, a lot of Marines want to go to the Marine-owned restaurant,
Yeah.
and they did not have enough people. They had to call in friends. People who a mom who's raising her kids, and that's what her profession is, and she was there working that night because her friends, the owners of the restaurant, needed people desperately to work, and she had previous restaurant experience, and so she was managing a bunch of tables, and they were just having a heck of a time having enough people to be able to take on the surge of folks who were there, and that is a common story. I just want to mention that because it's a
Yeah.
cold place, but that's a common story across this country right now, that it's really hard to find people for any kind of job, even jobs that pay really well, $30-$40 an hour. It's hard to find people for those jobs.
Absolutely. And so another thing that it really was a fascinating few minutes on MSNBC this morning. I really cannot get enough of it. Maybe it's Schadenfreude for me,
I
uh,
think it is. I
but
think that's the case.
but because another panelist said, well, is it possible that they're going to start to learn how to work without some of these people? Well, and of course the answer is yes. They're gonna
Hmm.
they're gonna figure out a way, and some are just untenable. Like some restaurants in particular are closed down. You're really some real shrunken hours. Some are trying to take some time in the afternoon between lunch and dinner. Others are say closing at 8 o'clock. Um, so you're going to see some real things happening, or they're going to get rid of a meal like breakfast and be lunch and dinner only, or so you're seeing that as one option. But then um, you're seeing a lot of places are replacing folks with robots, even in the food service industry, like actually running food to the tables as opposed to having a food runner, that they actually have it that So somebody in the kitchen would actually put the food on to a robot and have this is the table number and
Hmm.
have the food run out that way so that you don't actually have a food runner. Others, we're already seeing it in fast food places with the automated place to have your order taken.
Yeah,
Um,
kiosk. Yep.
yep. And anybody who does grocery shopping knows that Walmart by law is only allowed to have two people working registers and then 40 unopened registers. Um, so,
So this is what you should expect: is you should expect that these jobs are probably never really going to be fully um, brought back. This is a travesty for the country that we have. It's a mixture of the COVID rules and the the incentives and disincentives that are being provided by
yep.
the Biden administration. This is a big difference between Republicans and Democrats. Is Republicans tend to get human nature, and Democrats don't. So they kind of live in a la la land. And there's going to be people who think this is partisan, but if you really look at it, you just watch all the different arguments we have in this country. You're going to get that Republicans understand incentives and disincentives. We talk about that a lot here. And even if Republicans can't articulate it themselves, that they get these things like incentives and disincentives, these kind of economic ideas, they at least act as though they understand it. They take actions. They may not be able to say, "Oh, I think this will incentivize and this will disincentivize," but they're still taking actions that understand that. And Democrats don't. They want to have their grand vision of how they think the world should work, even if it doesn't work on the basic tenets of how human nature works. So they don't understand. They're beside themselves when they see that the big promises that they make and the things that they do create the opposite effect of what they want.
Yeah.
In this case, they've incentivized people not to work, and they've provided disincentives for people to work.
Yeah.
So Walmart can't open up these lines for people, and that's not just a line at the grocery store to check out. That is a job that
Yep.
their laws are preventing somebody from having a job. So disincentive. And then they create an incentive for those people who might need a job, but they have an incentive now in place for them to not work. And that's just obvious. It's like gravity. Obviously, this is going to happen, but they don't get it.
Yeah. It's well, and they said early on, right? Oh, these incentives for unemployment were to encourage people to stay home. Now, ev- we're supposed to believe that that's not the incentive anymore. That's the part that I don't get. So, um, but it is truly remarkable in this room.
Let's talk a little bit more. Let's move to another topic. Let's go
Yeah.
to um, the DeSantis. So I love this. DeSantis has learned how to be Trumpian. He's learning how to be interesting. He's not the most dynamic guy ever, but he's learning how to be a little more interesting. And we were fascinated to find out, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to play it or not, but we were fascinated to find out that he did his election integrity bill signing
Yeah.
on Fox and Friends exclusively. Didn't allow for anybody else to be there. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you need to do. Now, governors in general across the country aren't going to have the opportunity to do this very often. However, this was brilliant. And Florida is a large enough state, and it's become enough of a focus in the country that this is the kind of thing that they have an opportunity to do.
Well, and as I understand the backstory on this, he was already scheduled to come on, and so what he said is, "Hey, I want to just go ahead and sign this uh, on the air," and they said, "Yeah, absolutely, you got it." um, and then he really did set it up. As you can see, he's got people behind him there. He really had it set up for this moment. I encourage people to go and watch the full segment. We're not going to do that here, but really, the beginning of this segment really talks about what he's been doing for the to back the blue, what he's been doing to on COVID and the response in Florida. Anybody who's looked at recent tracking numbers um, see that he is really been in the place Uh, the numbers are going down there, even with being open, and he's really just got like, hey, freedom is where it's going to make a difference. So
Yeah, I think it's great, and this is the kind of thing that people need to be doing. I want to go to Fake News Friday, and let's talk about something that maybe was a little bit fake newsy that we got even a little bit had a bit of an impact on us yesterday. So I'm going to share this now. It's an interesting article. We'll send this out if you go and text me at 202-918-3345. We'll send it out a little bit later. But if Axios has probably a little bit better article on the Facebook tribunal, as we call it, this fake government that Facebook is creating, this international government where they are pushing all this craziness. So, Oversight Board knocks Facebook for a lazy Trump referral. That is a much different headline than what we all were treated to from all the different news sources in the
yep.
last couple of days on this. So, ultimately, this is something they should get rid of the tribunal. It's not making sense. It seems like they kind of created this whole thing to avoid having any accountability or responsibility for making decisions. And ultimately, what this is saying, this is by the way, Axios. I wouldn't say that I would endorse it completely, but it is a worthwhile place to check things out. It's also very quick. So this is what they're saying, and that's actually how they do this. They do little quick. Bite-sized things so you can get the information quickly. What they're saying, we felt it was a bit lazy of Facebook to be sending over to us a penalty suggestion that didn't exist in their own rule book, so to speak, in their own community standards, said former Danish Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt, an oversight board member at. So I will say, I would still point out, it's absurd to have the former Danish Prime Minister being in charge of this tribunal at Facebook and this, international government they're trying to set up at Facebook, bigger than any government. To have the former Danish Prime Minister deciding whether or not our former president can have his right to free speech is absurd. That
Yeah.
being said, it's also clear that the Danish Prime Minister thinks this is stupid too.
Yeah.
That this was that Facebook didn't do their own job. They didn't even follow their own rule book, which is what we're all saying, is that there really isn't a rule book, and whatever rules they have stated, they are not. When they say something's a problem on Facebook, they never tell you. YouTube does the same thing. They don't tell you what the issue is, and then they hope that you can guess. And then when you have a third time or second time or whatever it is, fifth time of the thing you didn't know you weren't supposed to do, but they tell you you're doing something and everything you're doing that's not good, but they won't tell you what it was. And then when you do it again, whatever it is you don't know you're doing, then they have every right, they say, to kick you off their platform. So this is a great quote. We are not here to lift responsibility off Facebook. We are here to be independent. Now, I also think this is stupid that that they even think that they're independent. So that's just a little bit more context of what's going on with this issue, and I highly recommend people do go check that out. If you text me at 291833345, if you text me, then you'll get that after the show. We'll just send this link out so that you can check that out. But
Yeah.
that's what I have for news topics today. Anything else?
Yeah.
Otherwise, let's talk about how to keep people out of jail
Yeah. Well,
when running for office.
just say hi to Joseph. We're glad to have you joining us. Appreciate the hellos there. And again, if you're out there, feel free to drop your question or comment in. We'll get to you for sure. And a question, we've been getting a lot of questions about this. That's why we are talking about it today. Is
This is based off of the audience. You guys telling us, hey, I'm a little bit worried about running for office because I've seen some things in the news before. I wonder if I can, it seems a little bit nebulous, a little bit murky as to how to do it the right way and not get yourself in trouble. So that's why we're going to have this conversation. And I'm going to read a couple of headlines just so people can be aware that there really is an issue. But I also want to say, do not keep this from having you make a difference for your community.
exactly.
If you follow our rules of thumb, you'll be fine. So the first one here, Frank Genta, who I'm sure is not a bad person. He's had issues for years. Genta faces campaign finance complaint. He's had issues on, something he screwed up on his um, campaign finances back in is that 2012?
I think so. I
It's been
think
a long time ago. That's another thing that if you mess up on this stuff, it sticks with you forever, for years. And these things do not get taken care of quickly. Another one here, former candidate for U.S. House of Representatives sentenced after conviction for fraud and campaign finance violation. Here's another one. Former Senator Artiles, I don't know if that's how you say it, Artiles, paid no party candidate more than $40,000 arrest warrant charges. And then another one, former congressional candidate sentenced to prison for violating federal campaign finance laws. And this doesn't just the candidates. There are people who have gone to prison, campaign operatives, for having done underhanded campaign tactics. And I say underhanded, like, if you attack your opponent, that's not really out of bounds in politics. They're going to do it to you. What we're talking about is doing things that are against the law, ultimately. For instance, many years ago in New Hampshire, this has been 20 years ago, the executive director, I believe, of the New Hampshire Republican Party, who is not a bad person, but got a little overzealous and used an auto dialer, which is a robo-caller, robo-dials, to the way it works with a robo-dialer is you have a list of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 phone numbers, and it calls and it sends a phone call to each of those people. Well, what happens when you put the same phone number in 100,000 slots, and then you turn the auto dialer on? It calls the same number over and over and over and over and over again. They thought that would be a funny thing to do to the opponents and to jam their phone lines. That got people in a lot of trouble and put them in prison. Ultimately, not smart. I think they thought they were clever, but ultimately there's a lot of federal communications issues, laws that you've broken in that case, probably across state lines and everything else. There's all sorts of different things that you get into, and that is the kind of thing that might seem like it was harmless for that day for those folks, but they got people into a lot of trouble. So these are the kinds of things that can happen in a campaign, and we're going to get into that. But at the end of the day, if you follow some of these rules of thumb, these general ways to just approach things, that you're going to be fine.
Yep. So before you even get started, if you're local level, go to your local election board, get the rules for the race you're running.
Mm-hmm.
In state campaigns or multi-county campaigns in states, you really want to go to the Secretary of State or State Election Board for those rules. And in federal campaigns, it's the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, that oversees that.
And why is that important if you're going to play the game?
Yeah, exactly. Look, this is true in Monopoly, as we talk about, but really any game you play, if you treat it like a game, you'll want to know the rules before you get into the game.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do, you've played Monopoly before with folks, and you get halfway in and they go, oh no, free parking here, that's actually, here you get $500, or in other places you get nothing, or you get the fine money or whatever. Well, knowing that, if you're trying to limp along and you got no cash in a game of Monopoly, you really want it to be the $500, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you land on it and you go, okay, where's the money? And they say, nope. You say, well, what? They go, well, that's not the rules here. And so it changes the game completely. We've talked about it a lot in elections, in the election rules, like the actual running of an election. Well, here it's what are the rules that govern you as a candidate? And they are different everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So in some states, there's no campaign finance limits. You just have to mark down every dollar that you get and who it's from. In other places, in most places, you can't take corporate dollars. And in a lot of places, they actually have pretty stringent campaign finance limitations.
Mm-hmm.
That's just on the dollars that are brought in.
Yeah, so this is really good. So the main thing is to get the rules, to really understand what the rules are. You don't have to become an expert on it, but I want to give people. I think there's two big areas where people get in trouble. There's money stuff. I mean, money stuff can be a real problem, and then there's um, probably extreme underhanded tactics.
Yep.
Or and really in that, it's almost always around the realm of undermining the voice of voters. And we're going to get into that. Well, I'll unpack that and make it a little bit more clear what I mean by that. But um, I think that's important. When it comes to the money, there's a general, I think, intention in all of what you're talking about. There's going to be like, you can't take more money than this and all those kinds of things. You're going to have to know that stuff. But there's another big idea that goes to it. When someone gives money to a specific committee, one, um, the money that people donate, they're not donating to you. And this is important for two reasons. One, for a fundraising mindset. When you're giving people the opportunity to be a part of your campaign, be a part of your vision, that's what you're giving them the opportunity to be a part of. When they donate to that vision, to that campaign that is going to make that vision a reality, that you and that person are just part of the same vision. They're not giving you the money. They're not putting it in your pocket. Do not view that money as your own. That money is for the vision and for the campaign that's going to make that vision a reality. It's not for anything else. And
Hmm.
it's not for another committee that's unrelated. It's not for another committee that might even be related. It's not for any of those things unless you have like a special committee structure set up that's done legally. It's not meant for something different than what they actually put on the check or what they actually give money to. So that's the first thing with money. And anything else that you would like to add to that, and any of the other ways that these rules can show up?
Well, I mean, really, when you think about money, then there's the other thing. It's the money that you can put in
Hmm.
and what that looks like. So a lot of people's problems come around the rules around loans. And so again, but this goes into the money frame, and it's important to know. Sometimes it's unlimited what you as a candidate can put in. Most of the time, actually. Uh,
Hmm.
Sometimes it has to be in the form of a loan as opposed to a contribution. Other times, but sometimes what people do is, and I think it goes to just being a little shady.
Hmm.
They might take a loan from someone to have it show as a loan from themselves.
Yeah.
That is not legal
But
unless,
money's moving from one thing to another thing to another thing. When you have money moving like that, that is always going to be a problem.
yeah. And the real key is to be fully transparent
Hmm.
about it. In most places, the in another individual can give a loan to the campaign. It's just got to be
Hmm.
very clear, and it's got to be, um,
It's not something people typically do.
you know, but it has to be done at market value and whatnot. So,
You have to have an actual loan agreement, all these different things. And I would say it's probably not the best idea to
you
get
know,
that kind of a private loan, but that could be something you do. And your compliance person is going to make sure that you have that. By the way, it's important to have a compliance person. That's a pretty good thing to do early on in the process. And to what are some controls you can put in? So you've looked up the rules and you know what the rules are. What are some of the other things we've now some of the other suggestions how to, because you're not going to become an expert on this
that's
overnight. A
right.
lot of this stuff doesn't really make sense to most people. What are the things you can do? First thing, get a compliance person.
Yep.
We can help people with that. So if you want to contact us at olsonstrategies.com, Dustin at olsonstrategies.com, or Sean at olsonstrategies.com, we can help you with that process.
Yeah, and
What
another
else?
thing you can do is don't have an immediate family member or yourself be the treasurer.
Yeah.
I mean, and we say this even though I'm going to guess that 40% of campaigns right now across the country have a spouse as
Or the candidate themselves.
as a campaign treasurer. And
The idea, the attitude, and I get why people think this is, oh, it's better for it to be in-house, to be someone I trust, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I get that instinct, and it's the wrong instinct because there will be problems. You don't have to. The FEC can be kind of fickle, and other entities can be fickle, and they can needle you on stuff. And if it's just like some kind of smaller issue that you might have with the FEC, that, for instance, if you don't get all the occupation employers for people, you've done your best, but they're needling you on it. It's not really a big deal if it's just some treasurer that they're working with. But if it's you, the candidate, and you're not the one complying, then it becomes not just a minor clerical thing that's getting worked on. It becomes you, the candidate, or you, the candidate's spouse, not following the rules.
Yeah, and it is not the best use of your talents if you're a candidate in particular,
Hmm.
and not the best use of your spouse's talents or abilities or
Hmm.
the way they can be the most helpful in a campaign. It also,
Even if your spouse is an accountant,
yeah,
terrible idea still,
and
because then they have even more accountability and more responsibility. And if there's any kind of mistake, it's a bigger deal.
and it really goes to this idea of be right and look right.
Hmm.
So, you know, it really comes down to when there is a problem, how does it look?
Yeah.
And if you've
And
if
this, and I want to highlight that this is one of the general rules as we go through this. Money gets spent where it was given, and not only be right but look right. These are two of the big rules of thumb that if you follow these, you're probably going to do a good job.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think, but just for example, if you have a compliance person,
Hmm.
somebody that's doing that, and the treasurer is not you or a spouse, and it's somebody with some degree of separation, not somebody that lives under your roof or whatever, or there should something arise that it's like, you know what, we've got people handling this, and I'm busy being the candidate, and most of the time, that's really handled that way.
Yep.
And so, and then
And the truth is, when you're actually in the middle of the campaign, you're not going to have time to really deal with knowing all the things you need to know about it.
no,
And even if you have the best of intentions, you're probably not going to be able to make it happen. You just aren't. You're
yeah,
not going to be able to make sure you're on the phone with the FEC to figure out this small intricate detail. And of course, you're losing if you do that, no matter what, in that situation. The other thing I really want to point out, that in the money realm, there's influence peddling. There's going to be, something to avoid. Really, is the sense of entitlement that people can have. So the next rule of thumb is don't be entitled, and watch out for the people close to you being entitled as well. So you think
yeah,
about the former governor of Virginia, Republican governor of Virginia, and his spouse, who took gifts from people, and they were, they were just thought, we're in this important position. We don't have that much money ourselves. And, people want to do nice things for us. Well, when you start taking things from people, it may not seem like it's a big deal, but you're going to get yourself in trouble pretty quickly if you do that. So I highly recommend watching that for that. I will tell you, over the years, the issues that I have seen more often than not is, unfortunately, a spouse who feels a little bit like they've given a lot of time, money, maybe they've loaned the campaign, and they feel like they're entitled to having some perks for having had somebody run for office, having somebody in office. They feel like they should get something for it. And if we use the campaign money to, I don't know, go on a vacation, or to turn a trip to some conference into a little bit of a vacation, that's okay. Or maybe we can buy ourselves computers for our house, or iPads. This is actually something that happened. A former lieutenant governor of South Carolina did all these things, his family. So these are the kind of things that people can get caught up in, is that in particular, the spouse will think that there's things that are entitled, and they'll think even once you loan your campaign money, that is not your money anymore. I
Yeah.
want to be really clear about that. Once it crosses the threshold into an entity that you are not the entity is the campaign. And you really want to have that distinction. It's not only good for you legally, but it's also good for you you'll be a better fundraiser if you don't have it convoluted in your brain as I'm the same thing as my campaign.
Yeah.
If you have it that way, it actually is going to cause you more problems, but it's going to be harder to ask for money. And in this case, once you give that money, you do not own that money. So this is a great question. When do candidates need to hire a campaign lawyer? I would say this is an important thing to have early on in the process, is to make sure that you have somebody at least identified as somebody who can be your campaign lawyer. You may not have to retain them, and of course, we hate spending money on things that we aren't going to be getting votes for, but you ultimately don't want to be losing votes because you're not setting stuff up correctly at the beginning. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I think I think that's accurate. Um, and I think we've seen, another thing that can happen though is that some people can get a little too like everything's got to be cleared by the lawyer, like all your all the language and everything you're putting out.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Well,
real.
it depends. If you're a campaign itself, then
Mhm.
that's not necessary.
Yeah,
Now, if you're spending lots of money on it, it's going up on TV, then it may need to have that. If you're going to be taking some pot shots at people, you may want to have a lawyer look at it.
yeah,
That is because you just want to make sure that they've looked at that. If you're an independent expenditure committee of any kind of form in the state that allows such things, or federally, that's where you really need to start thinking about having a lawyer
um,
on
absolutely.
retainer looking at all these things.
Yeah, that really is a great question. Appreciate you asking it. And and where we've seen a lot of elected officials and candidates get in trouble the most, though, is really when they spend campaign money or public money as their own.
Yeah.
Just to be blunt about it,
Yeah.
how many
Treating
home?
campaign money or public money. I'm going to restate that again. Treating campaign money and or public money as your own is always going to be, it's a terrible mindset, and two, it's the source. That lieutenant governor situation is exactly what happened there. Actually, in most cases, all those headlines I read at the beginning, that was what was happening
Yep,
in each of those. And then somehow trying to, the other thing those headlines also were, is having family members somehow get you a lot of money and then pretending like that money is your own. That's
yeah,
another thing that goes along with that. I would say.
yeah. I can think of no circumstances where home repairs or, in particular, could be a campaign finance expense. So
Mhm.
just we're going to help you out with that one in
So
particular.
I want to make a distinction there. So you have to be. This is where you have to be really thoughtful and careful. If if you were to, let's see, like, we have our home studios.
Hmm.
You are in a house build, a new home build in
Correct.
somewhere outside of Cleveland, and then I have my backdrop here. So this would be a little bit different if you were actually doing something that's specifically going to be used for your campaign in that realm. That might constitute a campaign expense. However, if you were to have the whole room painted and you got new furniture and you're doing X, Y, and Z, well, if you're starting to put a lot into it, then you're, as opposed to just like the backdrop, like if you put up an American flag, that might be something that's a campaign expense.
Yeah.
So you just have to think about how that looks and how you can actually make it very clear what it is. Because if it's simply, you know, home painting, that's not going to look right, and it's actually not going to be right on your
Yeah.
campaign finance report.
Yeah. Exactly. Exact. Excuse me.
And that
Exactly.
that might be a case of talking to a lawyer if you're trying to do
Yeah.
something like that.
Yep. And so, really, on the staying on the campaign finance side, you want to know who can give and who can't.
Yeah.
Um, like I know in a lot of municipalities, people who are contracted with the city cannot donate to city campaign. So you
Mhm.
want to know that before you.
A lot
Uh,
of times, U.S. Contractors can't.
mhm.
Federal contractors aren't able to give. People in the financial industries sometimes can't give, depending on what level you're at.
Yeah, and then and I think we've covered pretty well campaign finance, and just really the best thing to do is get a compliance person
Mhm.
and be in conversations with them about what it is that you're doing, what you're spending, and
And then looking at your these rules of thumb, to not only be right but to look right.
mhm,
To don't be entitled. Do not treat um, money. Do not spend money as though it was your own. Keep the money where it's given in the place that it's given. One of the things that's happened in campaigns over the years, this is for campaign operatives, is in Virginia. This is a Colorado Virginia connection. There was this campaign consultant, the campaign chairman or the party chairman in Colorado made a pretty big mistake and put this person in charge of a committee. And once he did that, there wasn't any oversight for it. And that person then took money that was raised for state campaigns in Colorado and moved it into. He thought, oh, we'll just do it for a while, I guess, and then we'll raise the money back into this committee. But he moved into an outside group that was spending money for a federal campaign in Virginia.
mm,
And I assume he thought he was going to move it back. Well, regardless, once it crossed the threshold and went into the other committee, went from the state of Colorado was meant to be spent there, and then it got spent in federal race. Even if he was able to get the money back, it's not okay. Anytime you have money going from where it was intended to another place, you're going to have problems. So that's no good, and that guy got to spend some time in prison for that, for good reason. One of the worst cases in recent memory for that. So anytime you're doing those sorts of things, you're going to cause yourself problems. One of the other things with campaign finance, there was a candidate in Kansas City. This has been we're probably looking at 20 years ago, 18 years ago. The candidate was I think an officer in the Air Force. Um, I think a fighter jet or a fighter pilot, and decorated career, but decided I have all this money in this campaign account. I'm trying to buy a new house. I'm going to use that as collateral so that I can do it. And he moved money between accounts the day to be able to close on the home, and I don't remember if he ended up spending time in prison, but a lot of problems, and it was disastrous for him and his family for having done that silly thing. He thought he was going to just move the money out for about 12 hours and then move the money back in. It's clearly dishonest. You don't have that money, and you're treating the campaign money as your own, and it's just not your own money.
that's right. Um, and it really is it's a great point, because in and we talk about it, and we talked about it here in the fundraising mindset. You want to make sure that you are not viewing this as a donation to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so by the same token, you want to also make sure that then you aren't treating it as your own money after
Mm-hmm.
the fact. So it's very simple on that.
Yeah.
Um, Now, looking to the campaign tactics
Mm-hmm.
and
We have
whatnot.
a good question
Oh,
here.
good.
What campaigning tactics could land candidates or campaign managers in jail? That's an excellent question, and
Yeah.
it's what goes into our next section.
Yeah. First thing I want to say on this is you want to know which campaign materials need a disclaimer on them,
Hmm.
and how, if there is a specific disclaimer required for your jurisdiction. I'll
Hmm.
give an example. The state of Indiana says this is the disclaimer, and these are the things it has to be on, and it's very specific. And it says, paid for by, and it lays it all out, however it lays it out. But it's right there in the book. If you're running for state office, very clear what you got
And
to
you
do.
can talk to anybody there who's a state official about that.
Yep, yep. And but it's very clear, and so it lays it out flatly for you. So what you want to do is you want to just know what requires it, and most of the time, and without it, or if you screw it up in some way, this is where generally bad news stories come into play. And you might think, hey, I put my logo on this, I think it's pretty clear it's from me. Well, that's not the rules. And
Hmm.
again, it goes to knowing the rules. So
Yeah.
first, that's the first thing. But then there are
So
the
I've got a question on
Sure.
disclaimers. So this is a real question, and it's a great
Yeah.
opportunity to talk about tincenttexting.com.
Yes. Perfect.
So there are going to be different kinds of campaign tactics that require different kinds of disclaimers. And it's my understanding in many cases when it comes to texting or even bumper stickers or different things like that, they might have a different requirement than, say, your TV commercial or your radio commercial or a large billboard or something like that. You might have different requirements based on the type of advertising. So, if you want to use tincenttexting.com, highly recommend it. One to
Yep.
one political campaign texting. This is by far the best quality out there with the rich media texting. That's what we call MMS. It's the cheapest, and it is also allows for 320 characters to go along with that. The best in the business, best quality, best service, and the best price by far that you can use. So if you want to launch your text today, go to tincenttexting.com. And I'm curious, what have you seen around the rules for disclaimers when it comes to texting and other advertising
Great.
services?
Great question. Almost exclusively, it's not required in texting, mainly because of the character limitations.
Hmm.
Um, sometimes the artwork might require the the disclaimer on it, and that also depends on the size of the artwork. So most of the time for texting, it's going to be smaller
Hmm.
than what's required. So in a lot of places, it's really based on size. So like your logo itself, and almost everywhere, doesn't require a disclaimer. Bumper stickers, provided they're a certain size, don't require a disclaimer. So
Hmm.
the same mindset comes to texting,
Hmm.
because you have a short character count, so there's not enough room to put in what I mentioned. Like in Indiana, the disclaimer would be almost half of your text,
Yeah.
and so they get, okay, that doesn't work. So what is it? So sometimes it's on the artwork in some of these places. Sometimes it's nowhere. So great question, and it really is one of the things that, and it's one of the things. If you actually read the 8 pro tips, we say you do want to make it clear who it's from.
Yeah, that's so
Um,
important no matter what. And then there's going to be different rules. So we have FEC rules on the
yep,
federal side that affect Federal Elections Commission, that affects your fundraising, your finance, all that. But then there's the FCC, and when you hear both of those things, it's the alphabet soup in Washington D.C. But the Federal Communications Commission, that is going to govern these things, not just for federal races, but also it is going to have an impact on your local race as well. Because Federal Communications Commission, some of the stuff they're doing is not even related to campaigns; it's about any kind of advertising
yeah,
and the way you're transmitting things. But a lot of the things that they say when it comes to messaging isn't just important to follow the rules because it's important to follow the rules. It also happens to be more effective. And one of those things is when you are texting someone or using a robo dialer or anything like that, is you have to make it clear who the call is from.
yes,
That is a requirement by the FCC. And it also happens to be really good practice because it's going to make your message more credible when people know exactly who they're getting a message from.
yep, exactly right. But yeah, it really is a great question on the disclaimer, and it's something that people should just know.
And I want to be really clear. We are non lawyers giving non legal advice. We're giving common sense advice. And if you have any questions, you need to call your elections officials for either your local locality or for your state or the FEC, or even contact the FCC if you have questions. Most of these organizations, this is going to be shocking as far as bureaucracies go, they can oftentimes be some of the more responsive people. That's
Yeah,
not always the case, especially when you get closer to a filing deadline. You have to
yeah,
realize that they're going to be inundated. The states are different. When Joe Manchin was the Secretary of State of West Virginia, he was terrible. His people were terrible. It was a terrible Secretary of State's office, one of the worst in the country. And pretty much when you contacted them, it was all just propaganda for Joe Manchin. And it was terrible. A terrible place. Colorado's Secretary of State used to be fairly good. When Scott Gessler was the Secretary of State, and before it was pretty good. And then Wayne Williams became Secretary of State, and it became terrible. So it just depends on who's in charge and what's happening, and things can change as far as those go.
yep,
But
exactly right.
call them and get your answers before you go out there and do something that could cause yourself problems.
Totally right. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great way to do it. And so yeah, so then let's get into some of the extreme underhanded tactics, as we call it. So
Hmm.
you mentioned the jamming of the phone lines earlier,
Hmm.
um, and you might look at your own, the 100-page booklet, and you say, well, there's nothing in here about that. Um, so maybe it's okay. Well, this again goes to what you were just talking about, the alphabet soup groups, right? The FCC oversees all of the communications that go out by phone or text and stuff like that. And so it is a completely different. It might be legal in your state to do it. It might even be legal for the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission. But if it's not legal for the FCC, they actually have very set fines and requirements, and you could be talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Could be talking jail time and whatnot for that. So you want to be very clear on that. So those types of things. One that we've
I
heard.
want to give people a rule of thumb on this. I mentioned it before, but when it comes to the extreme underhanded tactics, it's almost always around the area of undermining voters' voices or
Yeah,
undermining your fellow citizens' voices. So, in the case of this, the reason why this is a tactic that's wrong, it's not saying if you want to go out there and say your opponent's a bastard, that's okay. I mean, you get to do that. You should have some sourcing. You should have some reasons why that's the case and why they're terrible for people. Okay, that's fair within you're getting into the boxing ring. People are going to take shots both ways. Um, and they get to take shots at you, right? So they get to hit you, and that's fine. This is part of the process. This is how our founders set up our country: is that we could have public discussion between people, and that's very important. But what happened when they started jamming the phone lines? They were preventing their fellow citizens from being able to have their voices heard, or to be. And I say that they ultimately, one, they couldn't use their phones, but they couldn't organize, they couldn't make their case to people. They were undermining their fellow citizens' First Amendment rights.
yep,
That's ultimately at the heart of all this. So if you're doing any kind of tactic that's going to have that sort of an impact, that is I would say the kind of the acid test is what I'm doing. Is it going to undermine the fair ability of our opponents and others to have their voices heard, to be able to be a part of the process?
yeah, and I think that's a great rule of thumb, and it's
And it's
something.
not a legal rule of thumb. It's
No,
just this is my common sense on it, and this
yeah,
is I think it's a good way to think about it.
exactly right. And it really goes to what we call an extreme underhanded tactic that the Democrats right now are trying to legalize, Dustin,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is vote harvesting. Um, in most places, it's
Yeah,
illegal.
explain that. It's
Yeah,
I think people need to know that, and we've seen it mostly on Democrat campaigns. We do know one Republican campaign who hired a Democrat service. By the
yep,
way, this is in a moment will be a good time to talk about grass fire, because this is one
yep,
of the ways to avoid this kind of BS.
yeah. So first, what is vote harvesting? It's the
Hmm.
idea of collecting ballots and turning them in for someone. Um, and in some places, it's legal. It's legal in
California,
California. I believe it's legal in Colorado. I think you can collect up to 10 before you have to
yeah.
turn them in. Um,
But what
and
happens, and the way they do that, is someone might collect hundreds or
yeah,
1,000, and they have people either they have a bunch of people, then drop them off. Like, have a dozen people show up with 10 each and they drop them off. Or someone goes around the block, goes around the block, goes around the block, goes
Yep.
around the block, goes around the block, and they just keep dropping off 10. And that's how they do it.
Yep. And so it's legal in some places, but the reason we call it an extreme underhanded tactic is that it brings in a lot of questions about, um, what they call in criminal investigations the chain of custody
Mm-hmm.
is what I'd call it. So
Yeah.
first, is this really happening from you handing it? So if you're a voter and you go, oh yeah, I just filled it out. Great, you're going to save me a stamp. Wonderful. Well, I'd just encourage you to spend the 55, and even if it requires two stamps on it, spend the buck 10 and make sure that at least
Or
you.
just drop it off, take it to a
Yep,
drop off location.
yep. That and you're
In
actually.
most of these Republican election integrity laws, not most, in all of them, they're expanding drop-off locations for
Yep,
mail-in votes. And don't believe the fake news that all the BS from Major League Baseball. I mean,
yeah,
Manfred's an idiot. He doesn't know anything about anything when
yeah,
it comes to anything besides a boring sport. Like, what else
yeah.
does he know? So
Well, he knows that if you want to get tickets from will call, that you need a voter ID,
he
or
does know that.
you need an
Yeah.
ID. He knows
Well,
that.
he probably's never been to will call, to be quite frank.
Well, that's true. That's true. But he's not about to waive that requirement. But,
Mm-mm.
oh yeah, you just say you're Bob Smith. Here you go. Here's your
But
tickets.
in all these election rules that Coca-Cola says are terrible, even though they are, um, you know, they have no clue about these sorts of things, and they've started shutting up because the Coke market, Pepsi. We've used this example all the time that you have a job that's harder than Pepsi Cola. Pepsi Cola has been around for a very long time, and they've never had 50% plus one of the marketplace when it comes to sodas. Coke for 100 years has won that race. And they're doing a really good job of trying to figure out how to lose it in the
Yeah,
last few weeks.
it's
So anyway,
it's
Coca-Cola started shutting up when it comes to these other
yeah,
states that are doing it. DeSantis, we just showed, he's doing his bill signing on Fox and Friends. But to the point is that in all of these cases, you're going to have more ways to drop off your ballot. Don't hand it to somebody who you don't know, you can't trust. And it's so easy because goes to, it doesn't even have to just be right, it has to look right. If you're doing a tactic that your opponents and the media and everybody else is going to have to assume it was all on the up and up, if you're a Republican in particular, if they're
yeah,
going to have to assume you were on the up and up doing this process, then you're probably going to, if they're all going to assume that you weren't on the up and up. And this is to his eternal shame. Mark Harris in North Carolina hired this Democrat firm that specialized in vote harvesting. North Carolina has laws against vote harvesting. And even though the number of ballots that they determined were vote harvested was less than the margin of victory, Mark Harris never got to be in Congress, even though he got more votes in the election, it's amazing. This has only been a few years ago that this has all happened, but ultimately it was determined that he wasn't going to be able to be in Congress. And that's because, who knows, it may have been all on the up and up, but there's no way to know. Who
yeah.
knows if somebody went door to door, they got these ballots, and we always know, we have a general idea of which way you're probably going to vote. There's enough voter projecting, there's enough of the ability to be able to micro target, to be able to understand where people's preferences lie, to know who somebody is. In fact, it's as simple as if you walk to somebody's door and they've got an American flag, you're probably a Republican. If you have a BLM bumper sticker, you're probably not. So that's going to be really simple to understand who's who. And if you are picking up ballots from these places, nobody knows if your people drop it in the gutter on their way to the next house,
Exactly right.
if it's on the wrong side. So they can't know it, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Oh, exactly right. The that's why when we really look at this, we go, man, That is a dangerous thing to be in. And if you're doing it, you really got to make sure that you have all the procedures in place and that you are documenting everything every step of the way. Because who's to
If
say
you're doing it in a place where it's legal.
exactly? And so, um, you brought up grass fire. Look,
Mhm.
all of the one-on-one, human-to-human campaign interaction that a campaign can have, um, grass fire does it. Canvassing, petitioning, live calling. Uh, Really, you want to put your best foot forward in front of the grocery store, over the phone, or on the doorstep.
Mhm.
Nobody does it better than grass fire. When it comes to canvassing, actually having the knowing the rules, living by the rules, and giving people really empowering the voter to be sure that their vote's going to count. That is one of the things that nobody does better than Grassfire. So you want to check them out at www.grassfire.us.
The truth is, grass fire was created out of this is a big problem in ballot access across the
Yep.
country. There are a lot of people who break the law. This is probably the biggest place where people break the law and they don't seem to care. It's done on both sides of the aisle. Walker Stapleton in Colorado had to, he didn't have to, it was smart for him to withdraw all of his petitions because they had a felon who, probably multiple felons, but at least one for sure, who was circulating petitions on their behalf, fraudulently collecting signatures. That's illegal to have somebody who's not a registered voter in many places to do that. In most places, it's illegal to have felons collect signatures for you, and they were doing surreptitious things to avoid any kind of scrutiny, and he to his very great credit, once it was determined, he realized that these were fraudulent signatures. He withdrew his petitions,
Yep.
and that does not happen in politics very often. So that's that. But that's something that there are people that worked for him who made these terrible decisions, and you. This is something that's really important for people who are running campaigns. You need to be curious about these things. I'm shocked by how many people out there aren't that curious. They don't want to know. Just go do what you're going to do. I don't want to know about it. That is not the way to approach this because you may
Yeah.
not end up on the ballot. And as we always say, if you're not on the ballot, you don't get to win the election.
Exactly. Well, and so I want to give kudos to Walker Stapleton for what you're talking about. For
Mm-hmm.
anybody look back on that, it's not something he had to do, and it also gave us a glimpse into elections officials after the fact are not going to say that something went wrong. And it's why when people say, we say that the big lie, of course, is that the 2020 election was the most perfect election ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people who oversee the election aren't going to say, you know what, now that I look back on it, yeah, there were some things that were really kind of questionable.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't have handed over the keys to the castle to Stacey Abrams. Maybe that wasn't the greatest idea.
Maybe we just do a terrible job with our job. Nobody ever said that ever. No one ever said, you know what, I'm a complete failure and I do a terrible job. And I know you elected me, but you really shouldn't have. Nobody does that. A Republican doesn't do that. A Democrat doesn't do that. Nobody does it. So think of a basketball game and think of just the worst player who's throwing elbows, who's causing fouls left and right, and the stupid ref doesn't see it. It doesn't matter if you're the other team, you're like, look, this person's fouling. They're not going to, if they missed it, they're not going to say, you know what, I'm a terrible referee. I missed that. I'm now going to call a foul. They don't do that. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
They will call the foul on the person who responds. That's what's going to happen.
Yep.
And that's just the way it does. We have a question or comment here. Fellow candidates, do not do anything you do not want to be seen for all over the papers and the next day in a negative light, legal or not. Well, thank you for that comment. And that is something to think about when you're doing something privately or you're saying something privately. Is this something I'd be okay to have happen out of context in the paper?
Exactly. It's a great point. Appreciate that from Alex there.
I want to
Uh,
also get Joseph's comments.
yeah.
This is a little bit off of what we're talking about now, but still, Joseph, thank you for
Earlier.
the comments. It is freaking weird that we even have to talk about all the stuff what we're talking about earlier with the Facebook.
Yep.
the Facebook. Basically, they have brought China to us through social media, and now they're going to follow up through the government. That is a great point. These large international companies who are based out of the United States, but they want the Chinese market, they're wholeheartedly going along with the censorship and following them. Think of LeBron James, who seems to be cozy with China because there's an opportunity for a lot of money. Another comment: the invisible enemy is the internet now. They're using it to control whatever they want to control. Every day we hear people being deleted. As our guest a few weeks ago, Michael Rectenwald, called being unpersoned, I think, something like
Yeah.
that is what they do.
It's something to definitely be on the lookout for, and it's why we say, look, you want to be out there on as many channels as possible, as many venues, and
That you can handle without wasting your time.
yes, and so that's why we try to use a service that gets us onto 12 platforms and be able to do that as quickly and easily as possible, so that we can share this information with you, and we find it important to actually be a part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I thought it was a very important conversation we've had today, Dustin, about not just what's been going on in the news, and really taking a look at these depressed job numbers that can go solely back to the bill that Biden rammed through with no Republican support, because Republicans got it. They said, "Hey, this is about the worst idea for our economy."
Well, there's lots of bad ideas. One, they're creating inflation. They're putting inflation into the economy, and with all this additional spending. Then another thing that's having an impact on the economy is the impact of businesses get that the quote infrastructure bill that Biden is pushing is not an infrastructure bill. It is the largest tax hike in world history bill. That's what it is. And they see all these things, that they see the corporate tax rate's going to go up. They see that they're going to bring back the death tax effectively. And if you have a farm or a small business, that you're going to eat it. And they don't seem to care. They just think they can just use Jedi mind tricks. This is not a tax hike. This is a infrastructure bill. This isn't roads and bridges. This is human infrastructure, whatever that is. It sounds like robots.
By the way, you're all cogs.
Exactly.
And Joe Biden wants to invest in you. That's until you break down, like roads and bridges and other machines.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
exactly.
In that bill, and then this goes back to the quote COVID relief bill, which was nothing more than spending and extending unemployment benefits, and not just unemployment benefits, but unemployment benefits with bonuses. So every week you stay off work, you get bonuses for
exactly.
not working.
They just don't get incentives and disincentives. Let's wrap the extreme underhanded tactics. There's one other one that I think is really important that people know is illegal coordination. It's really hard for folks to prove this, but this goes to it not only has to be right, but look right. I think I would recommend being very, very careful. And a lot of people don't think about how this can be a problem. If you've already set up a campaign, you're running for Congress, you're running for state house or something like that, and then you start talking to people about setting up an outside group or what have you, and you just that point you got to be really careful, and you need to talk to a lawyer. You need to not be illegally coordinating money, because it does come back to money always, almost always, is that people are trying to figure out honestly how not to fundraise as much. This is one of the worst things. If you are going to run for office, the biggest thing you're going to do, and it's going to cause you lots of weirdness, is how can I rob Peter to pay Paul? How can I avoid making fundraising calls? How can I do this? Can I get one person to fund a whole outside effort? I'm going to just focus on that. And then you think that's going to solve all of your problems. And in the meantime, you illegally coordinate and you put yourself in some real trouble when you do that. Yeah. So that anything you'd like to say about illegal coordination, that was there's a whole world to that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. I think So this is one of these things where people think, like regular folks think, that there is this coordination between outside groups and campaigns that happens all the time. So they think, oh yeah, it's all corrupt and they all are talking to each other and they're all doing it.
And
The
they
truth
aren't.
is,
For the most part, I don't know very many people that we've worked with. I would say it might be less than 5% that
yeah,
I had even a question of like, this person totally doesn't care about the rules and they're just doing something
the
underhanded. Most everybody we work with at least tries to follow the rules.
yeah, I was going to say the truth is almost always it's not just barely following the law, but really going above and beyond to make sure, hey, there
Mhm.
is zero chance that I'm going to jail on this. And part of
And
it
I
is,
can only speak to Republicans. I have no idea
yeah,
if Democrats do that. So I can only speak to Republicans that they are really above board when it comes to this stuff.
yeah, and so, but this is one of these things where people might already think it's happening. It's not.
Yeah.
Almost very, very rare. Um, and the and you just want to be aware. Like if you're setting out and you say, okay, or something happens in the campaign that really makes it make some sense. Well, you just want to say, hey, put somebody who's not already deep in your campaign and say, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm going to have you work
There's
on.
ways to have an outside group and have it done well and have it done legally. And you do need to have a lawyer work with you or have people who already have these things set up. And you need to do it before you run for office. Um, probably a lawyer would probably give you a way that maybe things could happen. I don't know. It's not our. We're not giving legal advice here. I am telling you to talk to a lawyer if this is something that you want to do. At any point, talk to a lawyer. And what I would say is, before you even decide to run, that's when you need to do this conversation. Is where you're going to have the most success. And you have something that's completely hands off, and you're going to want to have somebody that you really trust to not do like the fella in Virginia did with the Colorado state money and
Yep.
spend it in the federal election. You need to have somebody that you know is going to be on the up and up, somebody who would rather lose than to do something that's going to cause you extreme embarrassment. And I don't mean like their messaging is going to be a little bit off from what you want. I mean that they're going to do something illegal and they're going to, one, put themselves in jeopardy and you. So
Yep.
that's what you really need to know, is that this person's going to make sure that they do things the correct way. And also, they're not going to run away with all the money, because they probably can do that legally in that case.
Yep.
Uh, so you need to be assured that that person is going to have your best interest at heart, that they're going to be paid fairly, but they're going to have your best interest at heart and not squander that money.
Yep. Absolutely. So, Dustin, how can people get in touch with us on the program here?
Well, I think it's great if people sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider. Go to politicaltradesecrets.com right now. Sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider. Get exclusive stuff. We'll be sending out our weekly insider email shortly, and definitely go and get on there as quick as possible. After the show, I'm going to send out the Axios article specifically on the Facebook stuff. I highly recommend people check that out, and you can do so by texting me at 202-918-3345. Again, that's 202-918-3345. For everybody on the podcast, 202-918-3345. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined us on the texting community. Really do appreciate your input. Thank you to the comments we got this morning and how that's been effective for this episode today. But go there and we'll send out the resources after the show. So those are a couple of things. And, I would say that the truth is it's impossible to know all of these things and to know what actually is commonsensical inside of a campaign, because a lot of these things are things you would never think about normally. So, Sean, what would you recommend to people to make sure they have a really calm hand on the tiller, to make sure they have someone with clear eyes as to what is workable and what is not workable on a campaign? What would you tell them?
Reach out to us at Olson Strategies. It's OLSON strategies.com. You can email me, Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. Look, we are committed that you are in the best position to really fulfill on the vision you have for your community, your state, the country, or even the world. And part of that is knowing these rules, double checking the rules, and making sure that you're compliant, that you're staying legal, working with your compliance folks, working with your treasurer to make sure that that's happening. So don't delay. Reach out to us today and make sure that you don't end up in an embarrassing situation or in a orange pantsuit.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Do you look good in orange? That's the question I want to ask. If you think you look good in orange, then don't heed any of our advice and don't get people around you who can help you navigate this stuff. But if you think all orange might be a little too much for you, then yeah, follow the advice and get people who can help you through that process.
yep.
And some of those other people who can help you through the process, we mentioned Grassfire. They exist to follow the rules and do it the right way. So use Grassfire for canvassing, petitioning, live calling, and schedule a complimentary meeting today, grassfire.us. You can sign up and do that there. And then 10centtexting.com for one-to-one political campaign texting. Go there and launch your campaign today. So thank you to everybody for that. Sean, closing thoughts as we wrap the program today?
Well, I want to thank all the folks for their comments and questions. They were spot on today. Really appreciated it. So thank you all for joining us. Also, look forward. Want to tell everybody I hope you have a great weekend. And we really do appreciate you joining us and being a part of the conversation. It's why we do it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you to everybody. We appreciate it. This has been an excellent time with you, Sean. Thank you for popping by and providing some neighborly advice when it comes to how to stay out of jail. That is really important advice to provide for people. So thank you very much for that. And with that, it's another episode of Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.